And I have the honor of moderating this panel. I am a fourth-year chemical engineering PhD student, and I am joined by three wonderful women, and I'm really excited to have an event like this coinciding with International Women's Day. I think it's all very important, and it's a great message for everyone. So our first panel discussion for today will focus on the value of diversity and inclusion in STEM. We've invited some remarkable women to join us for this discussion from a wide range of backgrounds. Our fourth panelist, Tina Clark, couldn't be with us today, but we're still joined by three wonderful women. First on my left is Lisa Barton. Her background is in law and engineering, and she participates in national forums on energy policy. She is the executive vice president of AEP Transmission. Next to her is Margie Tingley. She is based in Pasco County, and the company she founded provides solutions for major healthcare providers throughout the US. And next to her on the end is Rebecca Smith. Rebecca is a UF alumnus, and she is the founder and president of AD Morgan Corporation, which is a construction solutions company that actually designed and built the Bauman Meditation Center here on campus. She also has many other landmarks around the state. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and welcome.
Great to be here.
So our first question that we have, and sort of the name of the panel is the value of diversity and inclusion in STEM. So to you guys, what does it mean to have a commitment to diversity in STEM fields, and how does that diversity translate into the workplace?
You know, a commitment to diversity is absolutely essential these days, and a lot of it gets into what Shelley was talking about earlier. Innovation is the key for any company to be successful. If you're not innovating, and if you're not constantly pushing and driving your company to innovate, even in fields like the utility industry, then you're going to be left behind. And so it's because of that that it really creates that need for a diversity of thought, diversity in leadership to make things happen. And I just don't really see how a company can be successful unless they're trying to be as inclusive as possible of all ideas.
Okay. So for your guys' company, do you see a large diversity on the CEO and founder level up on the higher up part?
I'll talk for the utility industry, and the answer is no. You know, it is an industry, I would say about 85% still of our workforce are men. And that's very much because of the physical nature. I have about 2,500 people in my organization, and of that, there's 1,500 that are line personnel. We've been growing it over the past couple of years. I would say from an engineering standpoint, we have about 25% of our engineers are women, but it's taking a while for folks to get up to the leadership ranks, and that's something as a company we're really trying to focus on. How do we make that happen? Through a lot of training opportunities, through mentorships and so forth. And you know, I agree with Shelley completely when she was talking about just adopting a mentor. You know, if you really just have one mentor, you're only learning from that one person. You really need to diversify your mentorship pool. And if you've got, you know, 10 or 20 different people, and not all women, I don't think it's actually that as a woman engineer that you necessarily pick all of these mentors that are women, because all these men have been successful before you. So really diversify that group as well.
Right, well, oh gosh. He told me he was going to turn mine up really loud. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. I'm in construction and have been, you know, my whole life, architecture and construction. But in the last 3 years, I started a software company. So I'm going to be speaking from two different platforms, but I want to focus on construction because, like so many of the ladies that are here today, we don't have women in construction, let alone women in leadership. And so if I was going to have an organization of women who own commercial construction companies, it would be like one person, me. I'd have to bring the refreshments, I'd have to set up the furniture, it would just be a club of one. So it's been a little bit different, but part of the journey and bringing people into their wholeness for me was when women wanted to be in construction, they joined our company. It's a very fertile environment. I think when women are the leaders, there is just such a different you know, spectrum and opportunity that is provided to everyone, men and women alike. Because when you're growing a small company, and that's, I have relatively small company. We're not Skanska. Everybody's important. So what do you look for? Before you worry about whether they're a female or male, or whether they're old or they're young, is do they have talent? Do they have confidence that Shelley talked about? And so what I have found is that throughout the years, women in leadership, you just have to want it, because I promise you, men and women alike will want you to fulfill your own dream as leaders, because we all need leaders in our industry. And so again, to Shelley's point, reach for that. Because, I've facilitated many young ladies in construction, many young men in construction that ultimately stepped out and started their own company, and I really felt like I had just, sharpened the knife that killed me, right? And I'm like, wow. And I finally came to realize that that was really a great testimony to, my version of leadership, that I must have made it look so simple that they were going to go out and try themselves. And one woman in particular had started, and she was a secretary, and she just got better. She was more confident. She was interacting with the build team, and I said, you really need to move in the right direction of leadership. I sponsored her to get her license, supported her throughout her growth. She did an excellent job, ended up starting her own business. Unfortunately, and this I hope we get to talk about, be careful, because the jump right in, you have to follow some level of creating your ability to succeed. She jumped right in because I think she forgot to learn the rest of the story, which is leadership and either managing a large department or running a company, and so she ultimately failed at that. And one of the other things that she failed at is when she left, she didn't keep me on her side. She kind of just severed the tie and left us, in a position where I couldn't really reach out and help her. So there's a couple of really good lessons in there, but I think the diversity in all industries, whether it's a non-traditional for women or not, all benefit when we have the blended perspective of men and women, all of whom are thinking about the same goal and working towards the same goal, and it has just been an amazing experience for me and the people in the company, including the guys. I think we'd have to stand them up and kind of, pull it out of them a little bit, but when they start to sing, they would sing really loudly. There's a reason they're still in a company owned by a woman. When we compete with so many of the big companies like Skanska that's on campus here, and it's because they appreciate the style of leadership, the opportunity provided, because they are allowed to be on their own personal growth plan. And is that more of a female attribute in leadership than a male? I don't know the answer to that, but I know that in our company it has worked wonderfully.
Well, my background is quite different. I started out as a secretary, or a clerk, and then a secretary, and then a bookkeeper, and then I took programming courses, and I started my own business. I feel as if in life I've been pushed into mine. I didn't have time to plan. By the time I was 22, I had 3 children. So I won't go into that whole thing about my life, but I'm just saying there's opportunity everywhere you look. I took a programming course and started into the technology field, and that's when my salary went up, the demand went up, and when I was one of just a few women, but we used to laugh about that. We worked so hard, we didn't know what the opposite sex was anymore. We were just in there. We were having a good time, and it was working with men and women. Not as many women, but the men were mentors to me as well. And I've mentored a lot of young people coming up, starting my own business, and grew that from in my basement to a multi-million-dollar business. And the thing that I found is learn from every person you meet, no matter what type of industry they're in, who they are, what they look like. You can learn something, and then it's amazing how that comes back. Our mentor people, it's been such fun to bring young people along and then see them in a magazine later where they left a small town and started their own company and are very successful. And they attribute their success to you. That's one of the greatest rewards that you'll ever feel. But as a woman, you don't have to hide the fact that you're a woman. You just be a woman, and because that's who you are, and be proud of whomever you are, male, female, or what.
So on the topic of being proud and including yourself in these diverse fields, we know that in a corporate environment, a lot of change comes from within. So I was wondering if any of you could provide some real-life business examples on ways that you bridged the connection between the discourse of diversity and then actual inclusion and implementation.
Well, again, in construction, because it was so odd, really, guys, for women to be in construction and then to be in the leadership. There wasn't planning. There wasn't a program. You know, I roll into the front door and I walk around the office. I say hello to everybody. It just is. I can't even tell you that one of the words that Shelley talked about so importantly was confidence. I don't celebrate a difference. I'm just me. And I have heard more than one time, oh, that's no girl, that's Rebecca. And I'm kind of had to work through that a little bit at first. but that's really where you want to go. I think that in larger corporate America, there may have to be programs to make that happen. But if you get involved in a business that is a more of a small business and has an intimate knowledge, like we know families and kids and all that, it just is. And, you know, I have a very famous line that, you know, in my life of bumper stickers, someone said, Rebecca, you know what's wrong with you? And I'm like, what? You know, one more what? And so there was one thing or the other, and I finally just got to the point and I said, well, find something else you love and concentrate on it. And that way we won't talk about what's wrong with me, and we'll just get along just being everybody together. And I think that that's really, truly the goal, is that you don't want to celebrate a difference. And my experience is if you don't pronounce it, it is less prevalent and doesn't become it. Does that make sense? Just press on. I walk into a meeting, I can't even tell you how many meetings I walk into where I'm the only woman there, or that I'm on a big panel discussion, I'm the only woman there. And I promise you, by the time I leave, people know who I am, and it is amazing at the response that you get. Why? Because of the word confidence. Speak about what you know about what you speak, and just press on and not make it more of a big deal than it is, don't you think?
You learn from mistakes. That's the way you learn. It's by mistakes. If you make a mistake, just try to make it short and learn something from it. But I've worked in many times with the men going, and I would be called the secretary when I was a senior analyst and the expert in technology. But the priceless thing was when I allowed the male that was sitting before me that was making this assumption, oh, you brought your secretary, when the sales rep would have to turn to me and say, oh, that's too technical a question for me, you're going to have to ask my expert. But the one thing I found, I just smiled and didn't act as if anything different had happened to me or that they'd said something bad about me first, and I won a friend for life. And they would become mentors then. If they saw something where I needed something, they'd cut me a break. So I think if you just learn from people, and when I've never encouraged the male or female role, even having people say to me, men say to me sometimes, oh, you're not like other women. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? You know, I'm not like other women. I think I'm like every woman. Most of the women do have more talent than they give themselves credit for. They've experienced more, they've done more, and they've had to be the leaders, but never taken the role as leaders all the time.
So we have a large corporation, we're about 18,000, and we do have a number of programs, but you know, programs are not the answer. Programs are really like your undergraduate degree or master's degree. They're part of your tools in your toolkit. And so if it helps you with public speaking, if it helps you with learning some leadership techniques, great. But the real learning and the way of differentiating yourself is by doing and actually being a part of project teams and so forth. I think that, you know, one of the examples that we had is we had thought we had an answer for electric transmission in Texas. And so we said, okay, we propose 765 as a voltage class to be able to integrate the wind. That was in West and South Texas. And the state basically came back with no. They wanted more traditional technology. And so what we did is we challenged a small group of folks. It was two people, one person who had about 44 years experience, and one who was a young woman who had immigrated from China maybe about 5 years before. She was probably about 30 or so at the time. And we said, can you make double circuit 345 basically perform like 765, and that's something that in the utility industry had never been done before. And so after noodling on it for about a year and working together on it, they came up with a very innovative design, which we are patenting and we're launching, you know, commercially this year in the U.S. And it was just wonderful to see the diversity in thought that both folks brought to the team, and then to share that experience with the entire company. And the company basically seeing that diversity does work, and that it's not just, about a program and advancing somebody through a program. Because I think if you are relying on that for your success, then people are going to question who comes out of that program and how did they get to that position. You really have to prove yourself.
It's wonderful. From an academic STEM field standpoint, we've seen things in the news with horrible stories of, a professor telling you shouldn't have women in the lab because they'll cry, or a postdoc should not confront any of the issue of sexism in the lab or anything like that because that could hurt her position. And for you three women, it seems very much about the confidence and just being who you are. And that sort of helps to break that stereotype. So my question would then be, so how would you give advice as women to be your authentic self and put yourself in that authentic position and still be respected within your STEM field?
I would say don't stand around and gossip about things. If you see a problem going wrong, try first to take it to the person that you're having the problem with. If that doesn't work, go to the top, someone that can fix it. Present yourself, present your view, and say, now, this is just my view. This is between us. I will not discuss this any further. If you want me to take any action, I'll take it. If you don't, that's okay too. That's always worked for me, and I'd always go to the top when I worked for the huge companies, the large companies, and I always had an open door policy for my people and admired people that would come in. There is a way you have to present yourself and present this as, oh, this is something I've observed, not this is something that's wrong because you're making a judgment against. But this is something that I have observed, and I thought it might be, you might want to know about it. It might be some action you would want to take if you knew this was happening.
In construction, I would say, and just in business period, I'm probably going to be a little harsh, but I'm very specific to the ladies that go into construction. First of all, crying is just not appropriate in business. The reason crying isn't appropriate in business, if you think about this, is that it's emotional. Business is business. You guys may not have ever heard the TV show where Dragnet said, "Just the facts, ma'am." He'd roll into the scene and he'd have the lights going on and he was the detective and the woman was crying and she was crying and he just wanted to find out who done it, right? And just the facts. So let's go back to what Shelley talked about, being focused on your own inspiration, aspiration to do whatever it is that you want to do in business. Consider crying to be a distraction. Along the same spectrum, consider dragging in your personal life, your personal relationships, to be an equal distraction. When you're at work, you're there to work. If you want to be known as, the girl that's putting together the parties on Friday night, that's great. Don't then be surprised that you didn't serve your priority, which is to ascend in the company. Be okay with that. And I think that we're falling all over ourselves with this expectation that everything is everything and all things. Guess what, guys? The math is never going to change. Priorities remain priorities if you keep them priorities. And once you take it off your hit list for the number one priority and you bury it behind emotional issues, don't be surprised. Your success may not come to you in the timeline that you would like it to occur. And I don't mean to be harsh, because some people really are a little bit more emotionally bent than others. If you feel like you're going to slip out of a business mode and find yourself getting more into an emotional kind of state of mind, take yourself out of the circumstance. Run to the ladies' room, step out and walk in the parking lot, but just try to understand how truly valuable recognizing the difference between emotion and business. And that will help guide you in your behaviors and how you conduct yourself.
I guess the one thing that I would say is that people think differently. I mean, if you look at the elections and the absurdity of so much of what's out there, people think differently, and you're not going to be able to change the way everybody thinks on day one. I still remember starting in the utility industry, 29 years ago, and I had an assignment where I was working with one of the technicians, and at his desk there was this poster. That was back when tool manufacturers would give out free posters and calendars where it was a woman with pretty much nothing on other than a big tool belt.
Oh yeah, we had those all on the job sites.
Yeah, and it's really on how you handle and react to that. Don't take it so seriously. I mean, obviously that type of behavior would never be there today. But when you're in those kinds of environments, if you have a professor or somebody that is in your leadership chain from a management standpoint, I mean, just look at it as a challenge. That's what I encourage my daughters. I have 5 daughters, and I really encourage them to laugh a lot more, because you really have to. Don't take life so seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously, and sure as heck don't take somebody who's maybe in a leadership position, whether it be at a college or in your workplace, all that seriously. Just prove what you can do. And I do think you do have to pick your battles. Everybody's not going to think exactly the way you want them to.
So in the workplace, how do you create a culture that fosters this idea of diversity and inclusion? Like, what does that culture look like to you guys?
So for me, the big thing is team. I'm a huge football fan, particularly New England Patriots. I probably don't have too many fans here in the audience, but it's all about team. And it's all about that team that you highlight around you. And so by picking a diverse team, whether it be and I say diversity in terms of backgrounds as well. That project that we had, he was an electrical engineer and she was a chemical engineer, a civil engineer. And it was, that difference that really made everything work. And so when you start to have examples and you have successful examples of how diversity of thought is working in the company, you get folks to change their mind and to change their perceptions.
I think in including them in conversations and allowing them to come in and express themselves to you and listening to what they're having to say and see where their different point of view is coming from, and encouraging people to speak up, speak out, and let them know that life is tough. It's business, though. It's business out there. It's nothing personal against you. Focus again. I like your focus on what you have to do and get it done. If you do that, you don't have time to worry about the other things.
And in our business, we're the construction managers, so on our team really could be 300, construction workers that are all subcontractors. And when I find myself going out to the project and walking around the jobs or having them come in, you want to talk about what your team is and who they've become. You want to go to the next layer in, clients, in our cases, other subcontractors. You guys, I cannot even tell you that in my opinion, I'm going to go back to, that's no girl, that's Rebecca. I'm just myself. I love construction. I love business. I really think so responsibly about the people that are in our company and our team. And they're brought in and they're included. There's no closed door meetings. I am right there, talking about whatever the issues are, wherever it is in the company, because I want everybody to know what's going on. Now, obviously, there's a couple of business decisions that are kept, behind the scenes, but for the most part, it's very integrated. And the way our company functions day to day translates to the field, because those leaders go out and lead the 300 employees on the job site. So I'll be walking around the job site, and you have to just put this together. For them to come up and talk to who's that girl, but they will come up, these are construction workers that will come up and say, I just want you to know, working for A.D. Morgan is probably one of my favorite assignments, because when I come on your job sites, and they would go down a list of how our leaders were conducting that particular job site. So everything that we touch in our own world has another layer. So I would just, summarize by saying again, I'm very open. When we have our team meetings in the conference room and we go around and each project manager reports on the status of their job, let's just assume that I say, so tell me about your schedule. And they kind of have a lackadaisical response. Well, I'm kind of thinking maybe 4, let's just say 5 days behind. But I think we're going to Can you imagine how fast I come out of my chair? And I'm like, boom, in front of their peers. And I'll say, let me tell you something, Bob. That answer was unacceptable. And if I'm your client, I think that you are a bad manager. I said, you show up to this meeting, you know what I'm expecting to talk about. I want budget. I want cost. I want schedule. I want to know if the owner's happy. I want to know if subcontractors are creating a problem. You know what I want? Don't come in here and give me an idea that's not well thought out. And then I just rip them down. And before I leave them, really I do. And before I leave them, I say, and you know what? This is what is so amazing to me, Bob, that for the last 10 years, your projects have finished on time, within budget, your clients love you. What is going on in your life that you feel you can come in? And I said, it's not just me. Look around the table. All of these other people that are managing projects, when you don't bring your fee in or you diminish the A.D. Morgan name, we all wear that failure. So what is it that I can do to get you back up on rails so that you can be the guy I know you can be? So I never leave them bleeding, but I will certainly, cut to the chase. And what is that? It's open conversation. There are no secrets. Guess what happens when there's no secrets? There's less gossip, because they don't have to rely on somebody telling them what happened. It's like, I was there, that isn't what happened. So for me, how do we foster that? And we bleed between young, old, men, women. We just are very open, and we're honest. Political correctness really doesn't have much of a place in our business. I hate to say that. Probably you can enjoy that same freedom, but we are respectful, but we cut to the chase and we're honest. But I just will tell you that it's all about leadership, and you will know if you're a good leader because you have followers. I tell people all the time, you can't be a leader unless by definition you have followers, and you're going to have to keep your finger on the pulse of their read back. Think about this. Those gentlemen that work for me, they don't have to work at A.D. Morgan. There is a comprehensive value that they feel following my leadership, and they understand that it's not about them, it's about the team's success. They understand that if the young lady that was the secretary is now a project manager and she has, the support of the company to go get her license, it's not because I'm favoring her as a woman. I am an equal opportunity person. I am favoring her ambition. There's no secret. Just keep it open and honest, and what I have found is a tremendous result. So we are 28 years later, and the recognitions our company have received, whether it's the Entrepreneur of the Year or Outstanding Business or Fastest Growing Company, it's all about what we're talking about here today. It's about leadership and where you fall in that leadership and the confidence that you have, and obviously the brilliance that you all are, bringing to the table of your education. You will be sought out, and you will be given opportunities to rise in the leadership. I'm just going to say one last time about that emotion. Keep the emotional part of your life separate than your ambitious professional goals, and find yourself in a company that has open, honest dialogue where you get to be included in the conversation, and you cannot fail.
So before we end our panel, we have a lot of current and future leaders in the audience. So what would be a quick piece of advice that you would give to these future engineers, scientists, CEOs, and executives who will be transforming the future and being included in the workplace?
So as you change positions, and I would encourage you to look for different positions. Life is not a ladder. You don't climb it one rung at a time. You need to hop around a bit. You need to figure out what's that environment that you will be most successful in. I found it at my company, which was a very, very technical company and filled with folks who basically didn't have a voice. And so I listened. I listened a lot. Every time I took a new role in the company, I would spend the first 60 days listening, not talking, listening, because I really wanted to know what was the culture of the group that I was dealing with, what were their skills, what were their weaknesses, and I could only find that out by listening and going on that listening tour. So I think it's really, that combination of listening and being a promoter of people. People care about leaders who help them be better, and everybody wants to be a part of a winning team. So if you just remember those, I think, 3 things, it goes a long way.
I think that you covered most of the things that I would say about leadership, is that if you know yourself well, be kind to others, but listen to them and be all business, and go prepared, know what your bottom line is. That's when you're negotiating or whatever happens. Know what your bottom line is when you walk in, and be prepared to fold up your briefcase and walk out if it's not what you wanted. And you'd be amazed at how you don't have to get into an argument. Women usually don't. I don't argue with people. If you've got your mind made up, that's what you want, or my product isn't for you, and you'd be amazed at the number of times that the men sitting around would be afraid that I was going to blow the deal, but it didn't happen. I'd be sitting there. I knew what my bottom line was, and when they keep asking for more, I simply said, I'm so sorry we've wasted each other's time, so I'm going to say good day, and we will see you later, some future, and the best of luck. Pick up the briefcase and start to leave. No, sit down. We signed the contract. We didn't mean, but you have to be sure of yourself and be sure what you're willing, how much you're willing to commit. That's in life, too. I said, if somebody is my boss and I could stand on my head, and they told me to stand on my head, I would stand on my head for them. But if it compromised me in any way, I would not do it. Because first, be true to yourself.
I don't think I could stand on my head.
I couldn't. That's
like I can't even do the basic yoga stuff, right? So I'm going to take it in a little different direction and say, you guys, you're in technology, right? I have always governed myself in life. I was married and divorced, to the guy that I dated in college, for God's sake, so that was fast. And so married at 25, divorced at 26, got that worked out, and then vowed never to be married again, which left me what? A single woman building a construction company. I have always governed myself assuming that every single person knows every single thing I do all the time. And as a result, I've got a pretty boring life, but it's the one that I designed for myself. Why? Because I was really focused on my priority. And I remember the first gentleman that I hired away from Brown and Root. You guys may know Halliburton, Brown & Root, huge company. It's where I worked before I started my company. And I told him, I said, Terry, I can't promise you that the company's going to be successful, but what I can promise you is I will never embarrass you. I was 29 years old hiring men who were in their 50s working for $1 billion company, and we were nothing. So I took myself very seriously. And who would have ever thought? So throughout my life, I'm just working. I got a call about 5 weeks ago, and this is kind of the end of the story, or the beginning of the news story. I got a call that said, Rebecca, there's an open seat for the House of Representatives, and we would like for you to consider running. And I'm like, well, wow, what an honor. That's an incredible honor. And so then what is the next thing you do after you get the call and you say, gosh, I have a life, I'm running 2 companies, I'm the chairman of the Expressway Authority in Tampa, I went back to school, I'm working on my doctorate. I don't know that I have time, but gosh, what a nice honor. But I promise I'll give it some, good, serious thought. And here's the rest of the story after 28 years owning a construction company. I stepped out of my office into the halls of the company, and I said, you guys are never going to believe what call I just got. Do you know that these guys that I have worked shoulder to shoulder, they could have stood on their head. They were so excited, and they're like, my God, Rebecca, this is meant for you. Now, so let's talk about leadership. Remember, head down. I wasn't working out of a rule book. I was myself. I was honest. I gave them opportunity. I nurtured their dreams. I provided for their families at times that they needed extra provision. I just was a leader. So then I took the conversation to the marketplace, and I said, to people in the local community, I've been asked to run for the State House of Representatives. What do you think? And that's when you really get your report card. And I was so grateful that I wasn't dead, because I was able to hear all this in my lifetime. But it's amazing. It isn't till there's that acid test where people will really tell you honestly. I heard words like integrity. I heard words like you're not a politician, you're a business leader. I heard so many positive words coming back. And it is a testimony to, again, making sure that you understand. I didn't know that I was ever going to run for a public office. But my life, I look back, I'm like, do I have any dirt? And, the first thing is like, what's going to come out? What have I done? And then I kind of calmed down and I said, but, really, there's really not. Business decisions, all of which is in the public eye, the way I've conducted myself, privately, publicly, you just have to understand that as of today, if you move forward assuming everyone will know everything that you do, When you finally get to those moments where they're choosing CEOs or whatever it is that you aspire to accomplish, that you will be a contender based on your ability, and you will not be held back based on your, social performance or, your emotional decisions. I just cannot stress that enough. You're at the very beginning, and people are going to tell you that you're lucky. I recognize that every single one of you are working really, really hard and diligently, and I salute you all. Just, be your best person and just make sure not to interrupt your own potential, because at the end of the day, that's going to be, what we're all facing. So I just want to say thank you very much. This has just been a real gracious time for all of us. We loved everything that we have heard, the students that I've had the opportunity to speak with, the faculty here at the University of Florida. I couldn't be more proud to be an alumni, and I just wish you all the best, and thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, please join me in thanking our panel guests. So if you've been following along on Twitter, we've selected an audience participant from each of the last 2 segments to win prizes. I believe it was a Samsung Galaxy tablet and a Fitbit. We have 4 more gifts to give away today, and also our grand prize, an Apple Watch, at the end of the day. If you want to be eligible for that, you need to find one of our volunteers before each session begins and have them stamp your ticket. We will have the drawing of all the completed tickets at the end of the day today. And at this time, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and please check the time and be back in your seats at 10:45.